Shots echo through the timber as Belarusian dog faces fire warning shots to drive back alarmed shelter campaigners from Iraq and Syria seeking aid. Along the border, Polish and Belarusian colors eye each other warily through razor-line hedge. At night, Polish guards say they've been dazed by Belarusians applying strobe lights and spotlights as settlers sneak across. Shelter campaigners have described hellish conditions in the timbers and at extemporized campgrounds, where they hash branches for wood and portion water to survive. The body of a youthful Syrian man was planted in the timber in Poland on Friday, at least the ninth person to have failed this time. Others have been beaten by bushwhackers and stealers staying in the timber. This is the chaos on Europe's eastern border in 2021. In the once time, Alexander Lukashenko, the autocratic leader of Belarus, has gone from nuisance, to transnational leper, to nemesis. His topmost scheme yet has been to mastermind a new migratory extremity on the borders of the EU, utilizing the despair of thousands of people to take vengeance on Brussels for warrants against his governance. He believes that by raising this extremity to the point of a philanthropic catastrophe, he can force the EU to the table. In his most fustian commentary, he has indeed hovered that his supporter Russia could be drawn into a border conflict with Europe. He's not hysterical of deaths at the border, said a panel of experts from the European Council on Foreign Relations last week. For him, this is about revenge and is a matter of governance survival, meaning that he's ready to escalate further, and to seek Russia's backing in the process. Lukashenko's top backer seems to have baffled at his most aggressive pitfalls. On Saturday, Vladimir Putin said that Lukashenko was speaking out of turn when he hovered to cut Russian gas deliveries to Europe. I am hearing about this for the first time, he did indeed suggest it to me, Putin said in his first public reflections on the extremity since a column of further than settlers, numerous Iraqi Kurds, descended on the border last week. He could do this in proposition, but there's nothing good about it. Putin also receded Russia from the extremity, conceivably with an eye on EU warrants that are set to target Belarus and airlines ferrying settlers from the Middle East this week. I want everyone to know we've nothing to do with it, Putin said in an interview for Moscow. Kremlin. Putin, a show substantially about him. Everyone is trying to reshuffle some responsibility onto us in any case or without a case at all. But none of our airlines transport those people. Europeans, particularly Ukrainians, have heard these kinds of denials before. Since 2014, Russia has constantly claimed it has nothing to do with the conflict in southeast Ukraine, despite ample substantiation that Russian colors have fought and failed there, and that Russia sends plutocrat men and tackle to arm its delegates. Now, as Belarus's main backer in a conflict with the EU, Moscow is pursuing an analogous strategy, trying to initiate addresses between Minsk and European countries, in particular Germany, while playing the part of disinterested party. Many buy this. It's the same way that they had nothing to do with Green Men in Crimea, said Linas Linkevicius, a former foreign and defense minister of Lithuania, in response to Putin's commentary. Angela Merkel, the gregarious German chancellor, called Putin last week to tell him to impact the governance in Minsk. The High Minister of Poland, who has authorized extreme, controversial measures to push back settlers from its borders, has indicted Putin of masterminding the migratory extremity. The signals from Russia aren't encouraging. In the once week, US officers have advised of a new Russian buildup, with tanks, ordnance, indeed short-range ballistic dum-dums moving into border regions with Ukraine and Belarus. However, the unusual service exertion means Russia can mobilize snappily if it decides to shoot a large force across the border, if it does point to an imminent eruption. Our concern is that Russia may make a serious mistake of trying to reappraisal what it shouldered back in 2014, when it amassed forces along the border, crossed into autonomous Ukrainian home and did so claiming falsely that it was provoked, U.S. Clerk of State Antony Blinken said on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Russia has stationed paratroopers and nuclear-able bombers to Belarus for training exercises this week in a sign of its continuing support for Minsk. On Friday, Russia transferred 2 bombers over the North Sea, where the RAF had to scramble fighters to block them. The military-political situation in Europe is deteriorating. The NATO military buildup near Russian borders is continuing, said a deputy to Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu during addresses in Paris this week. Putin has also complained about recent NATO drills in the Black Sea and Ukraine's use of Turkish drones in East Ukraine. The rising pressure between East and West suits Lukashenko, who has projected his expedience on Russia's backing. He said last week, "We know that if, God prohibit, we make some mistake, if we stumble, it'll incontinently draw Russia into this vortex, and this is the largest nuclear power." But in turning himself into one of Europe's topmost pitfalls, the former Belarus husbandry master is playing a dangerous game. New European warrants, which could target airlines or indeed the Minsk field, are anticipated to drive Belarus further into insulation. And indeed stalwart opponents of Lukashenko question whether his Kremlin backing is unconditional. Franak Vyorka, an counsel to opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, said of Lukashenko's pitfalls to cut off gas to Europe predictably, he didn't consult the Kremlin. He's again trying to hide before Russia. The extremity on the border will be answered by dismembering absolutism in Minsk.